I'm Rob Schilling, Chair of the Washington Road Community Trail. Welcome to the WRC Speaker Series. Throughout the year, we will host events to feature speakers covering a variety of topics. They'll range from environmental concerns, photography, gardening techniques, and more. These events are informational, fun, and free, so bring your family and friends. Go to our website at www.wrctrail.org to check out upcoming schedule of events that you won't want to miss.
And today we have a very special workshop around tree identification, and we're going to go walk the trail, so it's an opportunity to walk and to ask questions. I'm going to introduce Rob.
All right, Washington Road Community Trail first came around in 1994, I believe. Mm-hmm. They put up about 20 bluebird boxes from the community college up to Robert Moten. And then it kind of was working, they were tracking, charting, and then it kind of fell apart. Construction started on Gateway School and kind of changed the trail, made it kind of disappear. But about, oh my gosh, how many years ago is it now?
4 or 5.
6.
That was my guess.
About 6 years ago, I think different people on the trail got together to bring it back, and we've done that. We've blazed new trail. We've put up 92 bluebird boxes throughout the trail, marked it, mapped it. Events last year, one of my students wrote a grant for $1,400 to replace some bridges that had been there since 1994. And my classes this year are replacing them. We've moved out the old bridges, and we got one done, and we have another one that we need to finish. So I'm excited. I love Winter Tree ID. When I used to take my students to Hashua, I would have my little book that I would never use appropriately, and everything was a birch. I don't know why, it's just how it worked out.
You're lucky, there are some birch there.
There are 3, I think. So, Steve, I'm excited to learn what you got.
Great. Well, my name is Steve Allgeier, and I work with the Carroll County, or should retitle that, University of Maryland Carroll County Extension. For those of you who've been around Carroll County long enough, we used to be the Carroll County Cooperative Extension Service, and over the years names have been pruned off, but we're still pretty much the same entity. We're part of the college, and our whole mission really, like many other extension services, offices around the country, is to bring research-based information to the public. And a long time ago, 100 years ago as a matter of fact, Extension celebrating its 100 years this year, with the start of the Smith-Lever Act, these offices around the country work primarily with agricultural families, and we still have that. We help the farmer. We still have 4-H programs, which traditionally have been based in agriculture, but now it's expanded. So if you're interested, please contact our office, because we have lots of great stuff there. My job at Extension is great. I really enjoy it. They may not pay me enough, but nobody's ever happy with their income. But if you have a bug question, a plant question, a lawn question, ticks, I get lots of ticks, please feel free to give me a call, stop by our office. We're right at the Ag Center complex. Or email me. My email is hortman, it's easy, like horticulture, so HORTMAN at UMD for universitymaryland.edu. And also, I have partners that help give me supplies so I could do these programs. Both the Westminster Tree Commission and the Carroll County Forestry Board help to support this, so I'd like to recognize them. As Marion indicated, we're going to go out and get on the trail and look at some of the plants that are along the trail. What we'll try and do at the end, if you're still interested, is we'll bring in some clippings and learn how to use what I call the keys or guides. And many of us are familiar with these books. They're great. They tell us what the plant is that we found. But there actually is a way of systematically figuring it out rather than going like this and, oh, it looks like this leaf. You can actually follow a guide in these keys, and we'll help to demystify it. We're starting at the hard end. In theory, a lot of these trees that we're looking at are out of leaf, and that's one of the main things people use to identify trees. Marion Ware brought in a great-looking leaf for me to say, hey, what is this? And we were able to identify quickly. So let's work our way out to the trail and start down and take a peek at some of these plants and talk about some of the ID tools that we use. You guys ready? Okay. One of the things that makes tree ID, well, actually easy, is that we have many dominant species. And some of the times when you're going out to look at trees, if you keep in the back of your head what the major species are, or maybe do a little homework and start to learn what these major species are. And what I mean by major species are the big trees that we tend to find in the forest canopies. And in Maryland, especially in our area, which is considered the Piedmont, we have primarily oak and hickory and tulip poplars are dominant overstory trees. There's a mixture of other trees mixed in, and it's a minor component. The worry right now is ash trees. If you haven't heard, there is a bug out called emerald ash borer, a very brilliant metallic green small beetle that just attacks ash and pretty much kills them. And there's lots of towns up in Massachusetts and the Midwest that have been suffering from this. And we do have ash in our woods, and we'll probably lose them because just a couple months ago we did detect emerald ash borer in Carroll County. They're very small and hard to detect, and they fly pretty good distances, so the likelihood is they will start to attack a lot of ash. If you have them in your home landscape, you can protect them, and you should probably talk with an arborist about that. It usually requires a chemical treatment, but that will give you some protection, and some of the treatments can last as long as 3 years. So if you have this high value tree, you can have it protected. Of course, it's going to cost money. The good thing in Maryland, I think, is that, at least in our area, is ash is a relatively minor component in our woodlands. We'll probably see some on our walk just because many of the ash species like to grow in emergent type of wetland areas. They're one of the early trees in, especially if we have some moisture in the soil. The other thing is tree ID isn't always, or plant ID isn't always visual. Some of the times I rely on smell. I'll break a branch and smell the interior. Many plants have very distinct odors, so if we run across those, we'll try and point those out. And a lot of times you can look at a tree and just look at the profile of it and say, boy, that is characteristic of a maple. And we'll talk about some of those cheats as we go along. You guys are so quiet and studious. Feel free to yell out. Oh, and one last thing is our area is populated by a lot of introduced species. So I'm holding up this nice little guide or key, and this pretty much covers native plants in our region. And you'll get to a tree and you'll say, oh, let me look it up, and you can't find it in any of the guides, primarily because it was brought in. Some are what I consider well-behaved. They stay in place, they don't rapidly seed out and produce large colonies, whereas others, and we hear about this all the time, are invasive. Invasive species is big in our world because they attack food crops or us, or push out desirable species such as plants or maybe even animal species because they replace the food that was once there. So we'll try and point out some of the invasive species. It's generally easy because our world is becoming is more and more dominated by a lot of the invasive plants and insects. The brown marmorated stink bug is a good example. So we'll be lucky if we make it 100 feet. Why did we bring it over?
Yeah. Where did it come from?
It came from Asia. It probably came in first to Philadelphia, although the first detection was in Allentown. And it was imported, they think, on some product packing material that... No, it wasn't intentionally. Now, we did bring over
many things thinking they would benefit us. And the best example was multiflora rose. We had the Dust Bowl back in the 30s, and we realized we needed a plant that farmers could plant out to help protect or create buffers, and now we have this kind of rogue species. The good thing about the multiflora rose is now there's a disease that came west that's slowly killing off multiflora rose. The problem with the disease, it's a double-edged sword. You have this disease that will kill slowly multiflora rose, but it also attacks desirable roses, ornamental roses. So that's our world. We love international trade, we love foreign products, and we get everything with that. And that's how most of the invasive species come over. There's a shrub of about 8 foot tall with red berries hanging from it, or reddish maroonish berries. And I believe that's what's called a calorie or Asian pear. And that is Bob Stewart, who's a retired extension agent, wrote an article a couple years ago on the plague of pears. And this Asian species, the most notable one, is the Bradford pear, which we brought over. We thought great looking species, and it fell apart after 20 or 25 years. It would break. It was very fragile and brittle. So they thought, hey, let's get an improved variety and introduce that so we don't have this breakage. But USDA, who brought it over, forgot their initial assumption that if pears are allowed to cross-pollinate, then they become fruitful and can multiply. And they knew when they first started with the Bradford pear, they didn't want to have another clone out there that could cross-pollinate, or an unrelated clone. And they forgot that initial assumption. And now as you go around DC in the spring, you see those white blooming trees off to the right and left of 95, it isn't cherry trees. That's where most of the new pears are introduced. And I'm seeing it more and more in hedgerows near the shopping center out in Westminster. There's a big patch of these calorie pears, which are basically the ancestors of the Bradford pear. Yes, young lady.
Do you have ginkgo trees in your woods?
I don't, and ginkgo trees are introduced. The funny thing was, they've discovered fossils of ginkgo trees down south. And there are ginkgo, they think ginkgo relatives were here, obviously, thousands and millions of years ago.
They're prehistorical.
You're right, prehistoric trees. But everything we're looking at right here, let me just double check, are all calorie pears, these seedlings. And they are typically now the first one in. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, and the land clearing crews that have been working to eliminate them with their mowers and whatever, is they have quite stout thorns. And these are thorns that will puncture truck tires and tractor tires. And I'll just pass this piece around. Be careful. It would be hard to really impale yourself, but you can see how sharp those thorns are. You can feel them, they're stout. And this is a spur or a thorn. And that's, I guess,
what... Look at spiders!
Oh, spiders are great. You should cherish spiders. I always run over and pick up a spider. I had one person who came into my office and they brought in a black widow. They didn't know it. It was a male and it had different colors than a female. And I said, let me check under my microscope. So I had my head in the binocular. I said, it's an adolescent male. It has these blazes on it. I didn't hear anything. I looked over and she'd passed out. So I had called but yeah, feel free to pass it around. You can see they're very stout thorns. And a lot of fruit trees in the pome family, which are apples and peaches, or apples and pears, have these thorns. You hear about spur-bearing apples, and it's similar, but they aren't invasive like this. And this is the beginning. If somebody doesn't do something in time, that's all that will probably be in there, other than some of the vines that will crawl up the trees. And then it's a struggle of invasive species. It's climbing bittersweet or honeysuckle with the pears.
Honeysuckle's like...
Right there.
Yes.
Tree ahead and give it excellent growth.
You know what? That is a good example. You could have a demonstration area of invasive species. So it's well, the way the noxious weed law is written, probably no other weeds will be put on the list, even though they probably should be, because the noxious weed law mandates that those weeds have to be controlled on state land. If they know about it, they have to act on it. Things like this would be a budget buster for most states if they had to act on it. Now, many states will act in high value areas and will try and manage it to the best of their financial capacities, but we have more and more of this, and a lot of this has been allowed by a native species. Deer have browsed out the competition for some of these plants. They've eaten some of the young oak seedlings and other plants. So what comes in, the stuff that deer don't mess with. And yeah. It's an interesting dynamic. Really, deer now behave, or as a species, almost act and feel like an invasive species. We've altered the biology of the population so that they can be successful. There aren't the limiting factors on deer that there once was, and it's made it difficult. So now we have this native species that's providing for these other non-native species by eliminating competition.
So, Steve,
Yeah,
when we put this box in about 4 years ago,
yeah,
there was nothing
wow,
here.
yeah.
Nothing. And now,
Sorry.
well, if you take a look at the nest, you see the grass.
Yeah.
But you see how it's filled up to the top? Could have been a bluebird, but now that it's gotten to the top, it makes you wonder if we don't have a mouse house now. Because as soon as somebody makes contact and gives the mice a way up,
Yes.
they'll hang out, they'll be in there, they'll be happy as clams. Let me see if I can.
And this is a great story because more than 4 years ago, this tree probably wasn't there. And you can see how quickly it grows. This is what, 11 foot tall. So it jumps very quickly. And a mower, typically most mowers can't chew through that. You need a specialized mower. Hard to tell what's in there. No mice yet. Yeah, I've gotten Christmas trees with mice that have converted birds' nests. And again, here's the story. Your Bradford pear, when you first bought it, didn't have these little pears. And now that it's been able to cross-pollinate with these other clones, the Red Spire and Cleveland Select pears, you get fruit. You didn't used to see this 10, 15 years ago on your pear trees. And now you're seeing these. And you can actually, I guess you could eat these things.
Is that as big as they get?
That's it. That's why they're handy for birds. This is why this plant is so successful. Birds will take this, passes through the digestive tract, and you know what happens next? It gets dropped off somewhere. Does anybody recognize this tree? A relative of it's on the eastern shore, all over the eastern shore. Nobody recognizes it?
I'm looking in the book.
You know what? It won't be in the book. That's the problem, yeah. The native species of this is a sweet gum, and this is one that the nursery industry created. They found a freak of nature that had rounded leaves, and it doesn't bear much fruit. The sweet gum, if you're familiar with it, has that round, kind of spiny fruit, maybe about that large, like a sycamore ball, but spinier. And this is a round form of it. The beauty of this plant, why deer leave it alone and why you have so much of it on the eastern shore, is if you rip this leaf, and again, this gets back to using your olfactory skills, and you sniff, tell me what you smell. This is called a sweet gum, but it's a round lobe sweet gum.
It does smell like pine.
Yeah, it smells like pine. And the theory is that deer probably don't like that taste. It's very pungent pine kind of odor. So a lot of, when we talk about landscaping to prevent deer, you may want to consider plants like this. Fortunately, sweet gum don't take over around here like they do on the shore. But it's a native plant because, again, the deer population have eliminated the competition. It tends to be the dominant plant on a lot of the forest patches along the shore. Okay. This kind of looks like a primitive grove of trees, and as noted earlier, this is another invasive species. It was featured in the book Tree Grows in Brooklyn, also known as Tree of Heaven, Ailanthus altissima. And this is a very fast-growing tree, and it's probably one of the reasons that it's so successful. And most invasive species are plants that love wide and variable conditions. I shouldn't say love, but are able to make their home in a wide variety of conditions. These things will grow out of the edge of a building up on a second floor. I saw that happening in Baltimore. It's called Tree of Heaven, and this plant grows quite quickly. Between these whorls of branches, it's probably 1 year's growth. So this is 1 year, and then this is the beginning of the year. End of the year, then another 3 foot up, you see another whorl, and that's how far it grew that following year. So this plant we're looking at is maybe 3 or 4 years old. The other great tool for identifying it is what?
Oh, for the tree of heaven?
Yeah.
Oh, it's these long branches and lots of leaves, but they're bilateral and they're gorgeous in the fall.
They are beautiful in the
It's
fall.
green, yellow, red, just fantastic looking, and it makes us sick to our stomach because our students come out here and we actually dig them up and try to remove them and plant something else instead. But they are really pretty.
And as I say, they have a very distinctive odor. And I always carry a pair of inexpensive pruners. And if you cut across it, or if you crumble up the leaves, in this case we don't have leaves, and you smell it, and it has a very pungent odor, different than some of the other ones. In the winter, it isn't quite as strong, and some of the times you have to cut it and make.
Free to break off as much as you want.
Yeah.
It smells like asparagus. I can't.
Here's some that's a little more. In the spring, it has.
Yeah.
I had to do a cross-sectional cut of it to get more of the odor. It's much more pungent in the spring, and a lot of times this mimics, or people feel it mimics, sumac, which is a desirable species, and it tends to grow in colonies like this does.
Do deer eat it or not?
I came off of those. That's one of the seeds, I believe, off of that same plant. Deer don't eat it, and probably again, it's that odor that helps keep the deer off of it.
I saw one. Jojo.
This is a great example of being able to identify, or at least place something in a group of plants. And when you use these keys, a lot of times they will ask you, and keys I'm referring to some of these guides, they'll ask you about the branch arrangement. Most of the plants we passed are alternating branches. In other words, you'll look at the stem and the branches go off at different points on the trunk. If you look at this, there's pairs of branches that are opposite each other. And in general, in Maryland and all over the Northeast, you can kind of lump those into a category, and a lot of people use the short expression mad horse. Maple, ash, dogwood, and horse chestnut all have opposite branches, and that covers many of the opposite branch trees and shrubs. Now, the botanists use madcap, which is maple, ash, dogwood, and Caprifolaceae, and then you have to know all the plants that are in the Caprifolaceae family and be able to say it. So we're pretty certain, I'm pretty certain this is a shrub just looking at it, because it has all these multiple stems coming out of the base, and it's not too tall. And this is a dogwood, it's a shrub dogwood. And the beauty of shrub dogwoods, and if you like naturalized plants that give you winter color, this is it, because you can see these stems. What color are they? Well, and they're almost a reddish. And if you want to keep a dogwood good looking, meaning these red stems through the winter, I tell people to go in and prune out the oldest stem that's coming out of the bottom, and that tends to encourage new regrowth. And the brilliance, the red, is usually on that new growth. So mad horse, or maple, ash, dogwood, or horse chestnut. In this case, it's a shrub dogwood that we found out in the woods. Another invasive plant.
But it's pretty.
It's beautiful. It's a Celastrus, or climbing bittersweet. This is engulfing our woodlands. If it isn't, this is like a classroom. If it isn't the honeysuckle, which is the green leaves that are further down, that's vining, it's usually this stuff. Actually, honeysuckle's all behind you on the edge. That green glossy leaf, and that's Japanese honeysuckle. We have native honeysuckle, but you rarely find it. It's almost always this aggressive Japanese honeysuckle. This will engulf any tree that's under 15 foot tall, as will this Celastris with the red berries, which is beautiful. That'll get up into trees that are 60 or 70 foot tall and start to outcompete for sunlight. So, yes, young lady.
Is that you get from the honeysuckle, if you can, like in the center of it, there's some honey on it that you can.
I do that all the time. I feel like I'm controlling it by eliminating a flower.
That's
So,
why I ran over to it.
the other young lady, I'm sorry, you had a question too.
Does this blossom like a rose, this wild rose?
Not really, no, it doesn't. It has a blossom, but it's not very visible. It just isn't brilliant, so.
So it's not the same.
No, it's not quite the same. So it's not as, wild rose is beautiful, but
How can you tell the difference between the Japanese honeysuckle and the native?
yes.
Great.
For me, I tend to look at the flowers and the leaf formation. The flowers on the native honeysuckle are in the orange and red family.
Oh,
And it blooms for a long period. Actually, I saw a cluster of it kind of sending out a new bloom set. And whereas this is more of a yellow or white. And that's
Can you
the
tell
biggest
from
difference.
the leaf?
Yeah, you can, but then I usually have to open up a book.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of honeysuckle. I'm just wondering what I have.
My bottom dollar bet is 99.9% of it is Japanese honeysuckle. So it's very, I really have never bumped into any naturally occurring honeysuckle. The other stemmy stuff, which is going to be hard to pick up with the cameras, is a great native that is invasive in other countries. And I just got into some the other day when I was planting trees because we were drilling holes through it as it was running on the ground. And I noticed a couple days later it's going away. I started itching. That's poison ivy in there, those light tan stems that are about this tall from here to here. And an open ground honeysuckle will form almost this thicket. Not honeysuckle, poison ivy will form a thicket, but we know in time it will tend to form a vine and then get up into the trees. It's gotten into Britain in spots, and yes.
Are these worm sacs?
Very good. It's actually there's a small grub inside of it. This is goldenrod. So have you opened these up at school?
I actually opened one up at my house. It was on thistle.
Thistle, yeah, there's all sorts of different insects that have discovered that they can inject a growth hormone into the stem of this plant. And this is part of the plant, this knob, it's an unnatural form. And in the center, my fingernails aren't strong enough, I should use a knife, I got it, is one little larva of, I believe, a beetle. And the mother had injected this into the stem with the growth hormone that created this nice little larval chamber, and you can see actually it's right there. You can see the grub.
Adorable.
And what's kind of cool is it actually injected into the plant not just a material that created this chamber, caused the plant to create the chamber, but it also created an inner layer that this larvae can eat. And actually it causes the plant to grow material that this larvae can eat. So it's a really cool system. It doesn't seem to hurt the plant too much.
So
You want to eat it?
Ew.
Tastes like chicken.
I've seen birds eat them in the winter, like they.
Yeah, there it is right here. And it'll, once it gets warm enough, it wiggles around.
Huh.
But it's kind of cool to open that up, and you can see all the frass from it.
That's
I bet you
really-
chickens would eat it, or guinea hens. They eat anything.
Yeah, we let our chickens eat.
You guys are chicken people. Good.
They eat anything.
Also duck.
Ducks, yeah, ducks are pretty good for that stuff.
Duck and two roosters that I really want to eat is off their head.
Off to the left, just looking at it, there's not a whole lot to look at because it's out of leaf, but we have what, a 35 foot tall multi-stem tree. Anybody want to take a guess at it with the loose bark that's coming off? Birch, it's very similar looking to a birch. It's actually a cherry.
Cherry.
Yeah, that's a cherry. It's one of the, I think it's a black cherry, and you find it in the area. And when we get close enough to a cherry, we're going to clip a piece of the stem off because cherries have very distinct odor. Again, getting back to that smelling.
Wild cherry?
Yeah, it's one of the wild cherries. Well, there's a white pine that was probably put in by an Arbor Day project of some type, and the Japanese honeysuckle's just starting to crawl all over it. So really, I think volunteers have a lot on their plate. It's freeing the trees up that you want to keep, protecting them like this oak tree behind us with some wrap around the base to keep the deer from rubbing it and destroying the trunk. So there's all sorts of challenges when you're trying to foster healthy new growth. And the one that we're looking at with the maroon, bright maroon, reddish cones off to my right is staghorn sumac. And again, that's a small colony. It can grow into a colony of this size, meaning this tree of heaven. But you can see its structure is similar. It has large internodal spaces or gaps between branches. But the big difference is in the winter, especially early winter before the birds get a hold of it, you can see these brilliant cones. I think this is a plant where it's only the female that produces those cones.
Is
I'd
that
have
the
to-
tree that you see in the city a lot growing in the sidewalks?
That one here is what you see in the sidewalk.
This one?
Yes.
No, that's not the one I'm thinking
Really?
of.
Okay.
Yeah, the one I'm thinking
Bring
of
me in a
has
piece
that
or take a picture. I get all
Okay.
sorts of great pictures.
When you're driving down 83 into the city, there's on the right and left, there's just trees
Oh, there we go. Our four-legged friend probably browsing on some, just ran right by us. The deer was running off there.
Doe, a deer.
A doe, a deer. Oh, let's start. Where's the music? It should be coming in. I'm not sure. My guess would be it's actually Oriental bittersweet.
Yeah.
And that is a plant that's both male and female. And some of the times you'll find large patches and you won't see those brilliant berries that we passed a couple times. And then all of a sudden you'll see a cluster of those bright orange berries right now. But that would be my bet.
Do you know of a way to get rid of those things?
Yes. You know, you can treat them with herbicides. This is, you're pointing to the pokeweed. A lot of people think it's a shrub, but it's a weed. I'm pretty sure it's a native weed. It's considered a weed because it gets into field crops, so, but it is a native plant. But it's very difficult to get rid of because if you ever dig up the root, we jokingly say it goes to China. It just goes and goes. So you can keep cutting it. If you keep cutting it, you starve the root to death. And a lot of these plants, you can manage it that way. But do you have the time to keep revisiting and cutting it and cutting it? You got to mark it on your calendar and make sure you revisit those sites, or you can treat it with herbicides. With that plant, some of the times you need to revisit it even with an herbicide to manage it. So it all depends on, you can try digging it up and you can tell the story about how hard it is to dig after you try that.
This is, we're getting chestnuts.
Ah, neat, yeah. So this is going to be a future chestnut plantation, as a lot of people are starting to hear the American chestnut, which is almost gone from our woods because of light brought in pretty much through the 20s into the 60s. It spread through the US. Wiped out our chestnuts. Again, something else brought in from Asia. We did it. And they've started breeding chestnuts two ways. One group has genetically modified the chestnut so it compartmentalizes the canker or the wound that's caused by the blight. But then there's also some people that have said, hey, let's bring over some Asian chestnuts and interbreed them with our American chestnut and try to breed the resistance that the Asian chestnuts have. And now we're very, very close, if not there, with chestnuts that are 90-some%, almost 99% American, but has enough resistance to fight off this blight. So, and you're going to be one of the trial plots right in here.
A lot of schools have gotten grants, and we put these up to keep the deer from eating them up.
Yeah, Carroll County's done a great job of getting out these new chestnuts into plots just like this. Hoshawa has one and a couple other places around the county. I think East Middle School, yes, East Middle School has a plot too. So if you didn't see a chestnut, then, this is great. What is that?
My students ask me this all the time.
You know what? I was thinking in the back of my head, maybe we'll see one of these. This is a persimmon.
That's what I
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought it was a strawberry.
It's a native plant. It's interesting. It's an indicator species in that a lot of times it falls in wetlands. Now this isn't a wetland. We're way uphill from the wet area, but it can grow in drier areas. You can. The problem is it's it's considered astringent. People describe it as drawing the flavor, drawing the liquid out of your mouth, and it has this very unpleasant flavor when it isn't right. And the rule is wait till it gets frosted once or twice, and then it's sweetened. So I'm going to be the test pilot here, and I'm going to try it just to see how edible. It has a relatively large seed in it for the
Like a
fruit side,
pumpkin?
two seeds. Yeah, kind of pumpkin shaped. I'm gonna, pretty darn good.
Really?
So it's sweetened up. It does have a slight kind of floral aftertaste, and it is a little bit drying still, but not too bad.
This is where we find out he played a trick on everybody, and it's really hard.
I've conditioned myself like in the Princess Bride, yeah. So it's still, to me, it still takes a little getting used to. No, you're part of the test population. Part of you can eat it.
I got
Yeah.
a cough drop in my mouth, so.
The one thing you're going to find is that
Exactly like your cough drop.
Oh, right.
the skin is more astringent. So if you want to avoid any of that flavor or much of it, you just eat the interior.
Does this start out as a little bush?
It does. It starts out as a little bush. This can get quite tall. I've seen it growing in farmers I've seen use it. Old farm fence areas, I've seen this growing along the fence, and I'm assuming birds have dropped the seed.
Please don't interrupt, sweetie.
No, that's okay. That was so we had our little. It's a little. Can you taste the astringency though? That a little bit.
On my fingers from the skin.
Yeah. So well, that's what I think I got too. But it has you'll see this fruit till wildlife takes it. As it gets older, this is a very attractive tree in a landscape because this bark becomes more and more pronounced. You can see how platy it looks. Not platy, but very furrowed, I guess, would be the description. And generally it has good fall color. And you're going to find trees that are given a lot of sun get better fall color than trees that get partial sun. That's deciduous trees at least. So. Okay, so pop quiz. What are we looking at right here, this little shrub? You guys, I'm not letting you rest on your laurels and just...
It's laurel.
No, you got it. That thorny thing, which is what?
I don't remember the name.
You don't have to, a calorie pear. It's a pear. Yeah. So again, our life has become a hodgepodge of different plants. The purple stuff is the berry off of Japanese honeysuckle. It's a very dark purple, almost black as the winter goes on. And honeysuckle is in the Caprifolaceae family. And if you remember Mad Cap, I know you're not going to remember Caprifolaceae, but it's opposite branched, and you tend to get your flowers in pairs on either side. So you'll usually see two of those black berries on those vines, and then you know, oh, that's honeysuckle because I see pairs of berries side by side. It does put out berries, and it does have opposite sets of berries.
Is it a purple berry?
No, I believe it's red. And I rarely see it lasting because I think birds take it pretty quickly.
I think maybe I have the American honeysuckle because I've never seen that.
We'll bring in a piece. Eastern red cedar, or it's really a juniper is the genus name. And junipers, if you have tolerant fingers, I'll just have again, a very nice fragrant odor. That's why juniper was used for cedar for making making boxes and cabinets cedar chests, hope chests.
Do they get little, like, kind of gray, white?
They get gray-white berries, and the gray-white berry, the juniper berry, in theory, I don't think it was the American juniper, is used to make gin.
Yeah.
So, or at least to give the flavor for gin. I think it's used as the flavoring that produces gin. Okay, what do you guys think? Gosh, it's got red kind of fruit on it.
It's got thorny things on it too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of thorny. If you look at the fruit up close, it's in the apple family, like our pear. This is a crab apple of some type. I'm not real sure which one it is. And we have the persimmon behind us, but crab apple will, if you go to buy crab apple at a store, there's 150 varieties of crab apples, especially if you look in the plant books. And usually I tell people, when you start to see lots of varieties offered as ornamental plants, it usually means that there's a lot that aren't worth it, and they had to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new one. And worth it meaning that it's disease prone or has poor structure or certain insects like it. But there's lots of crab apples that are considered ornamental, and then you see these crab apples that came up. My guess is this is probably something that a bird dropped in from some ornamental crab apple. Yes?
What's that tree over there that has the reddish thin leaves?
They're the remainders of the sumac leaves, those bright red leaves. And we'll talk, if we find one closer, we'll pull one off, we'll talk about compound leaves.
Just really quick, you're always welcome anyone to check on our
Ah, boy, that is neat.
And you just kind of knock on them from the sides, so you're not right in front. There's
Right.
usually a nail. But this particular one, if you take a look at it, this is all fluff. So this is an indicator, and this vine crawling up, that this has become a mouse house. And if I pull that fluff out, you'll probably see a little field mice scurrying away.
You know, that's a good thing to remember, is the...
No,
They
they're
may
not
have-
in there right now.
Now, what do they use for the fluff material, do you know?
Anything.
Okay, anything
This
that's soft and fluffy.
This is
Oh, that
seed.
yeah, it could be from milkweed
Yep.
pods or
This
things
is
like that.
Anything that they can find, trash,
would-
that's fluffy.
Do you guys pull the stuff out when you find it usually?
We'll be pulling that out in February. We'll go to all the boxes, pull out nests.
Do you have sapphire?
Oh, and then the
Go back
birds
to
will
vines.
start.
No, we don't have sapphire berry around here except in the garden. I'm not going to cut this off, but a lot of times I've had people bring this into my office and I'll say, hey, as they put it on my desk, I'll say, how allergic are you to poison ivy? Poison ivy forms a fruit, and it's a cluster. I had somebody bring it in, they said, are these old grapes? And I said, no, it's poison ivy. Of course, there was a scream, they ran out of the room, then they came back in. Is it really poison ivy? Because I do lie a lot. So, but this is poison ivy. The other thing I came over to cut off, is, let's see, we'll cut off a couple of these branches. I know they'll come back.
Let's talk about this one.
Oh yeah, what is that?
I can't remember.
Here we got red fruits, and it gets hard in the winter. There's a lot of red fruits out there. There's crabapple, persimmon kind of look reddish. This is the fruit, or hips as a lot of people call it, off a rose. This is multiflora rose, which is the highly invasive rose that, although I've been watching a patch that's been infected with this new viral disease, and sure enough, the patch is getting smaller and smaller. It'll probably never get rid of it. These are edible. I usually like them when they start to shrivel just a little bit. And they taste very much like an apple. Rose is in the apple family. And when people landscape their properties, many times they fall in love with a plant within the same family or a collection of plants. And I think that is a bit of a risk if you're worried about keeping that landscape a long time and not investing a lot of money in it, because plants in the same family or genus tend to be prone to the same diseases and insects. So even though you're buying a different type of rose, or you're buying a rose and a serviceberry and something else, all those plants are in the same plant family and they're subject to very similar diseases. I cut off a branch here and I'm going to score it a little bit. The sharp end will work better. I can't get the odor out of it. We have a cherry of some type, I believe, but usually cherry have a very pungent smell. Start looking at plants differently. Look at the branch arrangement on the stem. What do you see? Are these alternate or opposite branches?
Alternate? Wait, no, opposite.
she's the first one out. You're correct. They're opposite branch. So the opposite branch are maple, ash, dogwood, and horse chestnut. Here's where that doesn't help you. This is in the Caprifolaceae family, or it's a viburnum. And this viburnum produces a very distinct dark drupe or fruit. This fleshy fruit that's little pithy gets the name drupe rather than a fruit. Well, it's a fruit, but, and you can see it's very dark. I think it stains, it doesn't stain too much. I don't know if these are edible or not, but you can see it's a mealy looking interior. This is a great wildlife plant. It's a viburnum, and this viburnum is called Black Hall viburnum. I'm not real sure the derivation of the name, or Viburnum prunifolium. And I call it the perfect bird tree or condominium tree. Joe Barley, who owns Clear Ridge Nursery, always said he thought of it as a bird condo, because in the winter you'll see little birds hanging out perched side by side on these branches, kind of talking, and the tree will be covered. It's considered good bird food for certain species. Again, I'm not real sure which one it is. Well, this is under attack from Japanese honeysuckle, but it's unusual to see it planted, but it could have been planted by the trail group. There's a labyrinth garden up behind the Gateway School, and it's interesting. It's been in for, what, 5 years or a little longer?
A long time.
Yeah, and it has lots of interesting shrubs. As volunteers or people interested in maintaining some of the native plants, it probably would be great if somebody could come in periodically, maybe not pull all these vines off the top, but at least cut the vines at the base. That's going to cut off the lifeblood for these things up here, and hopefully not restrict the base of it or girdle that trunk. Because when you girdle the trunk, you end up suffocating the nutrient supply and flow of nutrients back and forth from the roots to the leaves and so forth.
Down on the trail where people live.
Good. Here's a great example of a native oak tree. It's a pin oak. I think it gets the name because of the foliage. Cutting through a lot of thorns, so I wouldn't recommend coming in. And pin oak are very distinct, I find, especially in their youth, because they have a very distinct upright habit. Landscapers love it because their form is very natural, even in the open where they're getting sun from all the sides. We'll have a pruning talk or demonstration talking about why you need to prune certain trees. Pin oaks, a lot of times you don't have to prune them to keep their form good because they naturally have good, solid form with one dominant leader. You can see this trunk goes straight up, whereas many other trees tend to form wide open crowns, which in time can become dangerous or fragile. But pin oak came in for a reason. And I didn't get the best leaf because it's been chewed by caterpillars, but it has these short or very distinct pins at the tips of the leaf. This is in the red oak group of oak trees, and that's a general qualification. Oaks that have these points are red, northern red oak, pin oak, scarlet oak, black oak. They all have those points. Yes, young lady.
I found pin oak in the book, and it says that they are popular street and parking lot trees.
Duh. Popular street and parking lot trees, you're right. The biggest downfall to pin oak is it's a wetland species. It does well in parking lots because that impervious surface mimics lots of water that roots have when they're in a wetland. So they do well. The problem is pin oaks like to have an acidic soil. So if you're going out and you want to plant a tree or a shrub or even many other plants that have a specific pH requirement, which is an acidity measurement, you should probably get a soil test to see if your species matches up well, because lots of pin oaks that you look at around parking lots turn yellowish or a chartreuse green because the pH is too high. And with pH is confusing, but basically the lower the pH, the more acidic the soil. And in parking lots, there's lots of calcareous material, gravel, concrete, that leach out calcium ions that make those soils sweeter. So they can be a struggle in landscapes. They can take adverse conditions, but if the pH isn't right, they can look sickly. And I know Westminster Shopping Center has a couple, and boy, they look anemic every year. They just turn that light green, and they're struggling. It's tough being a tree in the parking lot. Just doesn't seem right, does it?
Yeah, it
Is there
also
some
looks.
easy way to tell the difference between all these different oak leaves?
There is not. We are rich in oaks. We're a state of oaks. We counted one time, we went into a little woodland, and within 50 feet there were 15 different types of oaks. We thought this should be, we loved it. We thought it was great. But I would be happy with saying, hey, if it's got points on the ends of the leaves, it's a red oak, or in the red oak family. And if it has rounded leaves, does anybody know what oak leaves have rounded tips? Our state tree has that round tip. Yes, young lady, you are so smart. Tell me. Oh, you have a, wait, let me get back to you on the question.
Well, not really. I'm looking at this picture here. I think it is a revulsive.
That's a Russian olive. That's out of the oak family. We'll talk about that. I think we have some here. That's an introduced species. But the white oak family, which the Y oak was part of, our state tree, is in that white oak family, and that includes chestnut oaks. If you ever look at a chestnut oak leaf, it has lobes that are very short and has round tips to those lobes. You don't see this in big mature woodlands because it gets shaded out, and it's a locust tree. It's a pioneering tree because locusts, do we know what family or group locusts are in? And I wish we had some pods because then you would yell it out right away, and I don't see, there's a couple dark pods at the end of this, and they look like bean pods, and this is in the bean family. It's in the legume family. The legumes are notorious for having this association with a microbe that helps it produce nitrogen. And these rhizobial communities, these microbe communities, produce nitrogen, which is important in plant growth. We don't use it. We breathe in nitrogen all the time, but we exhale it. We can't take it in. What's 70% of our air is nitrogen. These plants are able to use that nitrogen via the association they have and start a community. And you'll see the first tree in a lot of times are locust trees. And they can have slight thorns to them. There's two types of locust. This is a black locust. And we passed another pioneering tree, but I'm quite sure we'll see more of it, so we'll point it out as we get down there. That is a bush honeysuckle. And besides the multiflora rose, during the post-Dust Bowl days, we were recommending, meaning government officials, to plant this bush honeysuckle. And I'm pretty sure this is called Tartarian honeysuckle. It has these brilliant red berries, which I don't believe are edible. And again, you can see this, if you look at this stem, we'll cut it off. You can see the branch arrangement is opposite. Again, we know this is in that group Caprifolaceae family. With these opposite branches, the leaves are opposite off the stem, and you'll see 4 pairs of berry typically. Here's a group. There's 2 pair of berries, 4 berries. And these were once where the flowers were. A lot of beekeepers are upset because they used to get very rich tulip poplar honey when tulip poplars were in bloom. These happen to bloom at the same time, and they aren't certain, but they think that the bees are going toward these honeysuckle bushes rather than the tulip poplars, and the quality of the honey they feel that's coming from this is inferior to what was once pretty readily available when tulip poplars were in bloom. And I point out because tulip poplars you rarely see in bloom because they're tall trees, and the blooms tend to be upward facing, so those blooms are way up there and it's hard to see them. Locusts are scrappy trees, and if you want to see the spines, they're as you go by, rub your hands here. I'll tell you, they're sharp, they'll break your skin. So be careful. You can see these spines coming off here, but you can see the pairs, the leaves on this plant are compound leaves. And it still isn't low enough to break off a leaf, but the little set or pairs of leaves running along that long stem actually are what make up one leaf. And that long stem is supporting the leaflets of that one leaf. So that's a good example of a compound leaf. Our tree of heaven is a compound leaf plant. That stem that breaks off supported a whole bunch of leaflets. This is a locust, and it looks like, I believe it's honey locust. And then there's also, to confuse matters, there's more thorns, but this is on a blackberry, which is a native plant. But it's this, yeah, I believe this is a honey locust. So,
It's a fun one to trim and move back.
what? Yeah, yeah. It's one of those plants where, hey, it's kind of neat to have along the trail, but you have to keep it off. If people are walking by, those thorns can catch people in the eyes. This was planted by a local group, I'm almost certain, although we do have these naturally occurring in Maryland. This is a swamp white oak. It has, and it's going to be hard to see, I'll break off some branches here. If you look at the leaves, this is in the white oak family, hence the name. You'll see the ends of the leaves, rather than having points, are rounded for the most part. Yeah, I wish it a little further along we wouldn't have to take these guesses as to what oak they are. For me, it's a swamp white oak because it has that flaky, this is an adolescent tree, a very young tree actually. It's only, maybe 20 foot tall, and as oak trees go, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, 80, 90, 100 foot tall. But this is classic adolescent bark, this flaky, peely bark. And its acorns hang on very long stems. That's another thing that people use to key it out. When the leaves are a little younger, they're almost felty on the bottom. And some of the times if we aren't sure, we'll pick a leaf up and rub it against our face. Obviously, I can't do it this year with this on. So that is a swamp white oak. We'll work our way up this way. Wow, all sorts of stuff. Okay. What is that? That is really cool, isn't it? Well, let's step back. This will be another pop quiz. What kind of branch arrangement do we have on this? And you're going to have to look up it. Just don't look at one point, but do kind of an average. This and this plant are the same genus and species. What's the branch arrangements? Are they opposite or alternate? What's that? They do look alternating on here, but go further out toward the branch ends and what do you start to see? Yeah, they become opposite, and it gets confusing because this plant went through a lot of stress. Probably some larger trees fell nearby and sheared off branches, so what was once opposite got knocked off. And that's why if you're looking in these guides, many times one of the first or early questions is, hey, are these opposite or alternate leaves? And I tell people, oh, the leaves aren't on it, let's look at the branches. The branches will reflect the leaf pattern. So in this case, these branches are opposite each other, and as you go further up this tree, it's uneven, but they're pretty much opposite branch. These are maples, maple ash, dogwood, horse chestnut. This is maples, and I'm pretty sure this is a red maple. We don't have the leaves. We got some ash leaves around from an ash tree, but I don't see the parent. That's the other problem is yeah, so what happened to it? What created this cool pattern? It was vines. Yeah, and it was probably honeysuckle vine or climbing bittersweet. You can actually see the culprit. It's right here. And again, it creates a neat pattern, but it doesn't help the tree. In this case, you can see the vine is included now in the tree. The bark has grown over it, and you'll see vestiges or stubs of the vine. These types of maples are pretty darn tough. Foresters see them in the woodlands, and they're a low value tree, so they'll probably recommend maybe cutting them out slowly or reducing the population and encourage maybe more of the high value trees. And high value just doesn't mean the lumber value, but it also reflects the value of what wildlife it supports. Acorns from oak trees and oak tree habitat support much more wildlife than many of the maple trees. There's lots of caterpillar species that will feed on trees versus a maple tree. But this is a reflection of, again, the effects of an invasive species on a native tree, the red maple. So we got all sorts of good stuff. I'm not even sure what that is. The tree behind it. Yeah, let's call it a birch. The tough one for most people tends to be black gum, which you do find in our woodlands. If you want to see large, mature swamp white oaks, behind Random House there's a new trail, and there are big 60 and 70 foot tall swamp white oaks. Not many, and I think there's actually a hybrid. Oaks are promiscuous, and every so often they cross and their seedlings come up looking like both parents. And many times we'll be out in the woods arguing, well, is that a swamp white oak or a cross or what? So it takes a little bit of time, and that's where I think really to learn your trees, you just don't go out on a walk like this, but you get out and you start practicing. Classic tree that's easy to pick out, especially this time of the year, just because it's holding on to these kind of muted green, yellow leaves, and it has a very distinct bark pattern. And many times you'll see this black stain running down the trunk. This is a mulberry, and that staining's probably from a bacterial agent. It causes bacterial wetwood, and they weep a little bit, and that runs down, and then a fungus will get in and start to grow on it. Yeah, the black staining. Does anybody recognize a vine, that hairy vine growing up that flaky bark cherry tree?
Poison ivy.
Good job. Poison ivy, you're right. So poison ivy, as it gets bigger, has a very fuzzy vine to it. So if you want to watch out for it, you got to watch out for it. Wow, this is one of the bigger stems too. This is a multiflora rose vine, I believe, that's crawling up. It's a rose. Pretty sure it's multiflora rose. Yeah, you can see here, here's the thorns and the green stem. That's a rose. And as you get up here, this coming off of that vine is classic rose leaves. Again, it's a compound leaf. What I picked off is a complete leaf. Usually you'll have then 7 to 5 leaflets. In this case, there were 7, but this is a classic rose leaf, and these are the leaflets that come off of it. They break away easily, so these are leaflets.
I will say this trail is very tasty. Middle to late May, early June, when these mulberries are all ready to go.
Yeah.
Frequently I take my students out on the hikes right about then.
Now, do you find mulberries are something that are in the, I guess, the mouth of the beholder? Some people like them and some people don't.
They're a little stemmy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You know, we just keep going till our fingers are stained purple.
Now, they're great trees to climb. They never really get terribly tall, especially in these conditions. And as a kid, I can remember laying in the top of a mulberry tree, eating mulberries and throwing them at unsuspecting people as they walk by. Okay, what's the branch pattern on this?
That is opposite.
It is opposite, and this is a maple. So,
Leaves on it.
yeah, no leaves on it. If you wanted to know what the fruit looked like in Tree of Heaven, you can see the Sumera, which are these wing seed pods in the top of these 3 or 4 trees up there. That's a future for a population. Tree of Heaven has, like Canada thistle, spreads by underground stolons that grow up, but it also has these seeds that will break off and flutter away in the wind. And the other notorious, I shouldn't say notorious, but famous Sumera would be off of maple trees, the whirligigs or helicopters, whatever you call it. It's a great way of moving your seed around. If you can catch the wind and keep yourself up there in those wind currents, then yeah, those clusters, as they drop, will start to flutter off as the wind catches them. And I think Tree of Heaven is dioecious, meaning there's male and female plants. So that's why you don't see these on every Tree of Heaven or Ailanthus. Here's something that's a bit of a problem for woodlands. It's a woody plant, But you can see it's not a tree or an upright plant. This is depending on other woody plants. It's not parasitic, but it will reach over and climb. This is a grapevine. And grapevine have this classic kind of exfoliating bark, a bark that peels away. And most grapes are indigenous to our area, but again, they are something that if you're trying to encourage woodlands, you may want to suppress the growth of some of these larger vines because they'll get up into a canopy, they'll start outcompeting the tree for sunlight, and they can also contribute weight to the canopy, which can then cause branches to fail. So ideally, yeah, it's kind of attractive the way it kind of sweeps across. But it starts way over there and it's winding its way this way and it's trying to climb up here. It probably doesn't stand long-term chance at this point because these locust trees are going to start to decline as other trees grow in and it will come down, but it takes advantages of situations. A lot of times as you venture into the woods and you're trying to look for samples, first get permission from the people before you cut anything off. And then as you go in, just make sure you avoid eye pokes. I try to wear glasses when I'm dealing with stuff like this. As you can see, I'm already getting hooked up with the blackberry. But we'll take, yeah, this is pliable, so it should have some fragrance to it. Get my clippers out and cut off a couple of these. I don't feel too badly about knocking down brambles.
I want to try getting
I'll leave it up to you. It's just as you get tangled up, kind of roll away or pull out of it. Hey, you're rolled up and tied up. That's the hazards of getting off the trail. I don't encourage it too often.
here.
Oh, why, thank you, Amelia.
Welcome.
I'll hold this.
I'm crumbling up with seeds.
That's something to do on the ride home. Yay, Dad says.
All right.
Sarcasm, I hear.
I shouldn't have taught you big words.
Okay, this is classic cherry, black cherry, and this is the odor if you pass it around. And probably one of the reasons why horse people worry about having cherries near their paddocks. This is,
Is it poison?
yeah, you're smelling the cyanic acids, I believe, and they're very, very distinct or stinky. And again, for me, I can recognize all these odors, and most people can distinguish between tree of heaven, this black cherry. They have very sharp odors, but they're very distinct in how they smell. So,
Do some people call that a poke cherry?
pin cherry some of the times.
You never
I've heard of.
poke cherry? P-O-L-K?
I haven't, but you know, in some areas they could be calling it. That's why you tend to use scientific names such as prunus means cherry, because then most people know, well, people who know the scientific names will then say. With firebush or firethorn, pyracanthus, some of the times is called many different names, and if you're from a different part of the U.S., you may use those different names.
It's really a hard wood.
It's relatively hard. It's not as hard as some of the other woods we talked about. Hickory and oak have typically much harder wood. Its form or habit typically in the woodlands is not considered very desirable. It tends not to have a very straight trunk. But it's part of our woodlands, so. That vine is climbing bittersweet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the climbing bittersweet has, this is probably a good descriptive term that you should be aware of because it's in a lot of the books, but these little spots are lenticels, and the theory is that they're actually pores that allow vines to breathe. There's also some poison ivy running up the tree too, and you can see the beginning of the hairy tendrils that clasp the things. But
Hit that with your clippers, I'd let you.
you know what? I can take prompts. I'm into maintenance.
You know, the next time we do this, we'll just give everybody a pair of clippers.
Right.
Yeah, it isn't a bad thing to do. It's getting all the clippers
Really?
back.
What type is this?
Well, it's off an opposite branch tree, and I'm not real sure. And it gets difficult. A lot of people can ID it. I just don't have enough experience IDing a branch quite like that.
Like
It's
a little
already,
green.
well, it's already starting to grow fungus. It's been down for a little bit. These little white lumps are probably fungal fruits that are starting to blossom out of it. Yeah, it's already decaying. This wood is breaking down. Make good firewood. This is a Norway spruce. Probably planted here 15 years ago, 20
years ago, they
Yeah.
planted these as trail markers.
Ah.
So there was one here, there's one at the entrance of the woods over by the community college, and there's also one by the bridge over here. These were intentionally planted as markers since they stuck out.
Yeah, that would make sense. There aren't many evergreens. In time, as these maples get bigger and this cherry behind me gets bigger, and other trees around it, it will start to shade it out. They're very shade intolerant, so they'll get thin and start to die out unless somebody continually clears other canopies to keep sunlight on this. Ooh, you got a nest.
Well, it's a bird nest, though.
Okay, here's a tree with leaves on it. It's a great cheat for me. Let's look at the branch pattern and habit. And this is, again, don't just look at the trunk, but start looking out at the ends. And a lot of times you have to step back unless your neck is really good and you can hold it there for a long time. I mean, as I look at the bottom of it, I see some opposite branching, but for the most part, the branches tend to alternate as you go out, especially toward the ends. You find a few pairs, and this is, any guesses looking in at that leaf shape that are hanging up there? What's that? It is an oak, yeah, and this is a red oak, and it's a true northern red oak, or Quercus rubra. And it looks like some grapevines that had expired. You can still see where the fruit were hanging off to this, really what are directly over most of your heads. And oh, the vine I see is started way over there and somehow latched onto the tree. So in time, probably if you want to keep this, I imagine somebody planted this years ago, you would want to cut that vine off way back there so it doesn't hamper the canopy as it crawls up into the tree. Grapevine will grow quicker than the tree and eventually get into the top and really hurt the top. This is off a tulip poplar. Again, this is one of the dominant, not quite pioneering trees, but it's one of the early trees in most of our woodlands. And a lot of times people walk into woods and find large trees like this. Watch out for the groundhog hole. I just stepped in it.
Weird leaf.
That's why I got short. Yep. Has a heart-shaped leaf. A lot of people describe it as a heart. I don't think it looks like a heart. I say it looks like a...
This one doesn't look like it. This one grows like this.
I know, and that's actually the classic shape for tulip poplar leaves, whereas mine's a little bit muted and stunted. But this tree right here is a multi-trunk tulip poplar. There's a good chance there had been a larger one here years ago. It got split at the base. And
Poison
these
ivy.
suckers came up. Watch out, you're right, poison ivy. And this tree is a tulip poplar. Its form isn't classic because of these trunks. Most of the time you see a large single trunk, and because it's growing in the open, it doesn't have the classic form of a very straight trunk. There's a little twist and bend, and it's starting to spread out earlier than they usually do. You can see this branch is heading way over that way. This probably wouldn't be a great sample or example to have in your landscape because this is, as it gets larger, probably a little bit liable to breaking out because of that load shifting out that direction and all of the attachments happening low down here. There's a chance of rot starting. So in the woods like this, you're probably fine. It isn't hanging over the trail. This just happens to be one of the early poplars in. Anything interesting we're missing over here?
There's a lot of dead branches dangling, so be careful where you...
Yeah, you got to watch out. Probably a good idea. Watch where you're hanging out. Here's, we have a little cluster of persimmon right in here. You can look at the bark and see the persimmon bark, that kind of pretty pattern in here, just 20, 25 feet off the trail, a lot of them there. And this is very close to what I consider average mature height. They can get larger, but you don't see them getting much larger than that because they get replaced many times with other tree species that will get even bigger and crowd them out. Here's a great example of our invasive climbing bittersweet still in leaf, and this is what it does. It turns a tree that was, who knows what's under there, but now it looks like Cousin It. It is just covered, and eventually whatever's under there is going to die, and all that climbing bittersweet's going to fall with the tree and just climb up something else. So it's a real thug. Probably one of the more aggressive plants, but there's plenty of other ones in there. A lot of times locusts, as they die, start to grow these shelf fungus, and this is a dead locust, and there aren't many things that attack locusts. That's why a lot of farmers and people like locust posts. You can stick them in the ground and they're very rot resistant, but everything has something that eats it, so even the resistant stuff. And these shelf fungus, they're kind of woody, are, I hate to say bloom, but it's the fungal expression that you'll see on the outside of something that's rotting away the inside or consuming the inside of the plant. Okay, here's a better tulip poplar in form, at least, in front of us as we go up the trail. They tend to have a clear pastel-y yellow like the one I'm holding, and the frost, or around the first early frost, they start to drop off. A lot of people see this in the woods and think, oh my gosh, this is lovely.
I mean, look at the pink.
Yeah, this is one of the burning bushes. It's probably the wing burning bush. Yeah, it is.
How is it the burning bush?
Well, it doesn't have fire, but it has brilliant color in the fall like this, which people consider desirable. It gets its name winged or elatus. Euonymus elatus. The elatus is the descriptive word for these wings that run along the stem. This is pretty invasive in woodlands. It's not as bad as some of the other things that we find, but some woods I've been in have been covered with this. And one thing to remember about invasive species is they aren't all created equal. Some of them do have certain requirements and some aren't quite as aggressive as others. But again, it makes a beautiful landscape plant. The big drawback is these little seeds get carried away in the wind, the water, animals, and then they end up here where they really shouldn't be. They're going to crowd out other plants. Wow, that is big. Non-native species, yeah.
Where's it from?
I'm guessing Asia, but that's just my default answer. Here's a maple tree that we don't like to see in the woods. It's a Norway maple. I don't believe it's from Norway. It just happens to have that name. But it has these large leaves. It's not horribly aggressive, but it isn't part of the natural landscape. I always find it easy to tell. The leaf is typically smaller. Big leaves end up a lot of times in the understory, and it's a great survival strategy. If you want to gather as much sunlight, these are solar panels, right?
No.
Yes, they are. They're gathering energy from the sun. If you have, what's that?
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis, exactly. I was going to say the same thing. If you need to photosynthesize and your light's limited because you got a lot of neighbors, you grow bigger leaves. And young trees that are down there on the floor got to struggle. And many times you'll see these uncharacteristically large leaves. And it's just, that's their expression.
Is this non-native?
This is non-native. It's dried out a bit, but with Norway maple, a great cheat, if you want to tell if it's a Norway maple, is if you squeeze a broken stem, you'll get a white latexy substance coming out. There's very little left here. This leaf is senescing, meaning it's going to drop off. So there's very little liquid left in the leaf itself. And for you, you can have it. You have a lot of native maples, but this was the tree of choice in the 50s and 60s in almost everybody's backyard or front yard. And now cherry trees have been the rage for a couple years. Bradford pears in certain areas. There were regional preferences, but you see it time and time again. Neighborhood starts and every house gets one of these trees. Well, we're going to come up to a new native tree that we haven't seen. Actually, we've seen a couple of them.
Watch out, poison ivy.
poison ivy all over that. It's kind of neat looking. It's hard to get poison ivy from this stem unless you cut it. But this is a really scrappy looking maple, and for me it's easy to identify primarily because of the clusters of Samara or seeds, yeah. And this is called a box elder tree, or Acer negundo, it's the botanical name. And you'll almost always find these down in low, wet areas. And I'm starting to look around and look up. And when you're ID trees, a lot of times I look up and I can see a lot of these trees growing down in here. They tend to have a very sprawling habit. They don't grow very straight, and they have bright green stems toward the end. If you know it's a maple, or you think it's a maple, and you see these green stems, and you see these pears, these buds are next year's promises. These are going to be leaves next year. And these bright green stems down in a low area with this kind of weird growth pattern. It's almost always a box elder maple, or a lot of people just call them box elder.
Why is it called box elder maple?
No idea, unless they made boxes out of it. The odd thing is, and I'm glad we don't have the leaves, is they don't have single leaves like most maples. They have compound leaves, where they have a long stem, which I should be able to find because we're right under one.
The elder tree was a tree in itself.
Well, there's elderberry, which really is kind of a shrub, but this is a box elder tree. And yeah, I just don't see any of the old leaf stems are on the ground right now. We can look at some later if we find them.
Now, what are those trees, that one and that one, that are growing so tall?
Yeah, these are cherries.
Oh.
Yeah, they're cherries, and they're one of the early birds in many times into woodlands. And they have that nice smooth bark that tends to flake off as they get more mature. But lots of box elder maples right in here. And again, it's easy to pick out with these bright green leaves, or bright green stems. This isn't a shrub, it's a native impatient. They call it jewelweed. And the big worry now is there's a new disease, it's a mildew. And I don't know how many people like impatiens in their landscape, but they had to put some warnings out to people because there's a mildew that's killing impatiens. And I had people coming in the last couple years with stems like this in the middle of the summer saying, a rabbit ate the leaves off. And I said, no, the rabbit didn't. And sure enough, we were able to peel these dead leaves that had just sunken down and clasped themselves around the stem. So the worry is that it will even affect our native impatiens. People like jewelweed because it was considered an old-fashioned remedy for poison ivy. If you thought you were in poison ivy, it does seem to have a soapy type of juice that you could rub on and, in theory, reduce your chance of getting poison ivy if you were exposed to it. I don't know what the research shows, but it's a great story. Okay, here's our mama tree. I'm almost certain somebody planted this, but we picked up here. This is white oak, and here's a great looking white oak. It's rare to find this is an adolescent white oak. What's that?
Nice and straight.
It's nice and straight. I bet you somebody had the forethought to say, hey, let's plant some oak trees in here 20 years ago with that Norway spruce. And it has the classic round lobes with the deep sinuses, these curves into the leaf, and the bark is already flaking like the white oak in the woodlands as they get more mature look. So good looking white oak. Hopefully you can take your kids here or grandkids here in a couple years and have a tremendous tree to look at, maybe 3 or 4 decades down the road. Now this is a reforestation project. It doesn't look like it, but in order to get a lot of plants started where you don't have the competition of the invasive vines, many times you have to start this way, meaning you put the trees into a turfed or open area and keep mowing it to reduce the pressure of all those vines that could crawl on the tree till they're big enough to kind of make it on their own without the vine pressure. The thing I worry about here is deer pressure, because as we saw, deer will come into this area and they can easily rub their antlers as they're trying to shed or chew on the leaves, so that's always a problem. What we're looking at in front of us are oak trees, these big tall trees that are holding their leaves. These are very popular in urban landscapes. Again, it's a wetland oak tree, but it's in an urbanized area, and we like it because the soils are compact and it kind of mimics the conditions that, that wetland species grow in. And these are called willow oaks. Have a very long, kind of narrow leaf. Get calls about this all the time. There's greenish gray stuff growing on my tree. Yeah, it's growing on the tree, but it really isn't hurting the tree. These are lichens, which are, it's a weird association between a fungus and an algae, and they've married themselves together to form this slow-growing organism. They don't penetrate or hurt the cambium, which is the layer beneath the bark. And that's the important layer that actually contributes to the health of the tree. It just grows on the outside. And it creates, to me, a very attractive pattern. You'll see these growing on rocks, and some trees have associations with certain types of lichen. So you'll see this all over the place.
How long will they stay on? Will it stay on there for a long time, or do they die off?
I think it'll stay on there hundreds of years, at least the patch. But my guess is it isn't just one organism that lives forever. It's just slowly replacing its, yeah, exactly, forming a colony. Yes, you did.
Do you know what type it is?
No, but this is a great observation. When you find funguses, many funguses, I jokingly call it's a mushroom, this was a mushroom, are really almost the fruit of something underground. And many, many funguses feed on wood, especially they help wood decay. But it may be an indicator, especially found close to a tree, that there's some rot on one of the roots maybe down below. So if you had an arborist out, they would probably investigate, they'd dig around and see if they could detect a rotted root. Roots are tough, they can kind of compartmentalize any damage, but it might be worth, say, having somebody come in and assess the tree's health. Looking up, its crown is pretty uniform and it looks relatively healthy from what I can visually see, but it's good to kind of look down every so often to see what's growing around the base or if there's any damage at the base. So, right here, these are two Norway maples. Again, a popular landscape tree. You'll find landscapers many times using plants we consider invasive, because remember what we said about invasive plants is they're the things that can survive adverse conditions or a very wide palette of conditions. And Norway maples for a long time have been considered that type of plant. It's a little bit of a problem. Some of these Norway maples now are getting funguses and starting to die back in the crown and also develop root rot, but we'll find a new tree. Here's a foreign imported tree called Horticulture. In Connecticut, it's been banned because it seeds so vigorously and all these seedlings come up. Up here we have, or here down south, we haven't seen that. So we're, you know, the verdict's still out, but it's been around for years. And here we have a red bud that we just planted a month ago, maybe? Somewhere, yeah, 3 weeks ago. So hopefully this will leaf out. My only concern was it was a tremendous tree that was dug. And when you dig a tree, you lose lots of roots. Roots are vigorous. So we'll look to see how it does this spring, and might be a good thing to work on for a pruning demonstration to see how to prune a tree like this, if we need to or not. But just a couple good landscape trees. And then a paperbark maple, which is an Asian maple that's very difficult to propagate. Introduced species, but boy, you'll never see it spread because almost all the seed capsules are empty or void. Beautiful tree, slow growing too. Wow, well thank you guys for coming out. Why don't we go inside real quick if you're interested in finding out just a couple resources that are good to have. I didn't bring what I think is the best book. It's a little bit bigger and I didn't think we'd need it.